It's the Tuesday episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. As the Steelers get ready for the 49ers, we get you ready. We talk about Kenny Pickett being voted captain and Cam Heyward saying what he did to earn that respect from the Steelers. Also, what do the Steelers need to do to stop Nick Bosa? Ignore the outside talk. That guy is probably going to play in this game. That and where Desmond King fits in this defense, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Nick Farabaugh of SteelersNow.com. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL or enter promo code LockedOnNFL for a water bottle with any owner. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Now, as I said before, we're joined by Nick Farabaugh, SteelersNow.com. Alan Saunders on vacation, so we got to give him a little bit of a break. He'll be back, though, as the week goes on, so get ready for all their content at SteelersNow.com. But, Nick, the captains came out, and the Steelers announced Cam Heyward, duh. TJ Watt, duh. Miles Killebrew, always special teams. But Kenny Pickett announced as a captain. Not that it's like too shocking, but I think it's another really good sign of his development and the respect he commands of his teammates.
Yeah, I'd never had any doubt about Kenny Pickett's intangibles. I think that was the one thing I knew from the get-go he was going to come into the NFL and kill. He came into Pitt's locker room like that too. Didn't start his freshman year, but they magnetized around that guy. He's just the type of guy that is magnetic. He's got this like quiet charisma to him. Like he's not like a super vocal guy, right? He's not like a rah-rah guy, but what he is a tough football player that puts his body on the line for his football team and is a great leader for his guys. Like you can tell he lets everyone hear what his concerns are. I think that's been something I've kind of picked up on is, talking to like Allen Robinson, George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Calvin Austin. They're like, yeah, he'll talk to us and talk about what he's seeing and he'll communicate that. So there's no misunderstandings. Like everything is clear, concise. You don't have any questions with Kenny Pickett. You know what you're going to get with him. And he's a natural born winner. Like there's a belief in that guy. He has that intangible magnetism. That's kind of what I call it as a quarterback, right? You have to have this magnetism in a locker room where guys from all different backgrounds want to come and play for you. That's what's tough about a football locker room, right? Because you're not going to have guys from similar backgrounds. You're going to have guys from different backgrounds, and you yourself are going to come from a specific background, but everybody wants to play for Kenny Pickett because he's a guy you'll put your jersey on the ground for. That's the type of football player he is, man. And so I didn't have a question about this. He commands the locker room with respect, and that is their quarterback, and that is clear as day whenever you talk about him. I think that's the biggest thing. Everyone respects that guy. And he's only a second-year player. He's an older second-year player, but he is a guy that came into that locker room last year and magnetized it.
Absolutely. Here was Cam Heyward, of course, him being elected a captain. He talks a little bit about that, but then we started asking about Kenny and gave some interesting answers because remember, they're locker mates. So they're right next to each other. So Cam Heyward, he kind of made it clear he was going to be that guy that was up on Kenny's case, from the get-go. But here was Cam Heyward, Steelers locker room Monday afternoon talking about that.
Every year I'm just appreciative to be voted by these men and to represent them. It's never about me, it's about the group. And, being a captain should be a serviceable job where you represent everybody in this locker room and everybody outside this locker room who claims to be a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. So, we got a lot of work to do, but I think we got the right captains in mind to get the job done.
What did your locker mate here, Kenny, do to earn the role of captain from his teammates?
He sat next to me. No, I think Kenny is just a kid who's just continued to work his tail off. Whether it's off-season or in-season, communication. I think he's just grown leaps and bounds from last year. And with that, there's a leadership role in that. And whether it's challenging guys on the field, holding guys accountable, working on your communication, having that dialogue back and forth between your guys. That's what a leader should be.
Cam, does it help that Kenny wasn't given anything? That from a respect standpoint for you guys, that he had to work his way up from third to second to be the starter?
I don't think we were ever going to have anyone just given the title. I think that we love that Kenny's worked his tail off, and everybody sees it. I think everybody sees the leader he's going into, and he's going to continue to emerge into.
Was there ever a point where you gave him words of wisdom that you were surprised how quickly he picked up on something?
I don't know if there's something I was like, good job, buddy, keep doing that. But we bounce ideas off each other, and we have communication. Whether it's hey, this is the time to really press on the gas and challenge guys, because you got to be able to challenge guys when you need to, but you got to be able to listen too. As a leader, it's not always just having the biggest voice in the room, but also hearing what guys are saying and making sure that we accomplish what the group needs.
So there you have it from Cam Heyward talking about Kenny Pickett's leadership, and it seems to fit a lot of what the Steelers want in a guy, and not just in a leader, but in a quarterback, a guy that hears out his teammates, because he has to manage relationships. It's a huge part of what you need to do, and across the board, and set expectations for your teammates, challenge them to meet and exceed those expectations. And again, I think this was the whole plot of bringing in a Kenny Pickett, a guy like him. Nick, you and I covered him in his college days at Pitt. We saw the leadership that he brought to the Panthers locker room that got them to win an ACC championship, the only ACC championship in that program's history. And we saw how he was respected across the board, how everyone, like you said, they wanted to lay their jersey in the field. They wanted to go to war for that guy. That's who Kenny Pickett is, and the Steelers wanted to make sure that they could cultivate that. And I'm sure this. He hasn't even played a regular season game in his second year, but all the signs that we've seen point to he is on or ahead of schedule for the Steelers.
Yeah, he looks ahead of schedule on the field too. I think that's been something that has really backed up his leadership off the field, right? Is that his on the field mentality matches that. He's just a hard worker. He's tireless in what he does. He's down to the very minute details. I think that's a type of player you want to play for whenever you are a wide receiver, whenever you're a defensive player and you see your quarterback going as hard as you are. He's going as hard as any practice squad guy just trying to make their ends meet right on the field. That's what your quarterback needs to do. Some of these quarterbacks just lollygag through, say, I'm the quarterback, have this big ego, and they can't connect with the locker room, right? And that can be tough when you have a quarterback like that. That's not Kenny Pickett. He's a guy that comes in and really works hard every day. And you have seen that on the field with some growth that we've seen in training camp in the preseason with processing, pocket presence. His accuracy even looks better this year. He reshaped his body, right? All these different things. And he worked his way up. I think what Cam Heyward said there was something interesting too. Started as third string, and he earned his way to being the starter. And by the end of the year, he proved that he could win in weighty moments too. The fact that he's a clutch quarterback and the moment isn't too big for him, don't discount what that can do for a team when their quarterback goes into a moment like that, like for example, the Ravens game, and he goes out there calm, cool, collected, and it says, we're going to win this game. We're going to score a touchdown. Well, the rest of the guys on the team say, you know what, if he believes it, we can believe it too. And that's the qualities of a good leader, especially quarterback. Kenny Pickett really exudes those qualities.
Absolutely, all factors into that situation. I wanted to take some time just to talk about that to lead off this show because, when Cam Heyward speaks, it's important. That guy, he has carried the flag of Mr. Steeler and literally carried the Franco Harris flag onto the field for the Steelers. He has been that guy. So for him to say something like that and talk about Kenny Pickett like that, there's some real going on right there. I want to talk about this upcoming matchup with you, Nick. You're a football guru, as we always appreciate. So I want to get your thoughts on some Nick Bosa and the defensive line of the Niners, how they match up with the Steelers' offensive line. We'll get that on the other side of this break here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Nick Farabaugh. But first, before we go anywhere else, I want to remind you guys that this show is sponsored by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs make you look good. They use stretch khaki shorts designed to fit slimmer on you through the thigh and the leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better, and they fit better than regular shorts because they're not made of stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fix this issue by inventing this cloud knit fabric that looks just like khakis but stretches so that you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Bird Dogs use anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long, which is huge, especially because it is hot out here again. So go to birddogs.com/lockedonnfl and you'll get a free water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnfl for a free water bottle. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Nick Farabaugh of SteelersNow.com. Nick, let's get into this matchup with the defensive line that the Steelers have, and let's lead with Nick Bosa, because there is an ongoing contract dispute where Nick Bosa and the Niners are going back and forth, and he hasn't been at practice, and there's always wondering, is he going to play? The Steelers have said, as we'll get to Dan Moore, he spoke about Nick Bosa and some of the defensive matchups they got. The Steelers have said they're expecting him to play, as they should expect him to play. The Steelers 1 year during Troy Polamalu, when he was negotiating a contract, he literally signed the contract when he was getting on the plane on the way to a game. So like, when you have players like Troy Polamalu, like TJ Watt when he was holding in against the Steelers just a couple years ago, like Minkah Fitzpatrick, and like Nick Bosa, he's up there in that category as far as playmakers in the NFL. He's the reigning defensive player of the year. When you have a guy like that, you expect him to play. You playing for him. If he doesn't play, that'll be a crazy story. But you know what? You'll be better. It's better that you prepare for him than wonder about what's going to happen if he's not in there. Nick, what do you think happens with this Nick Bosa situation, and what does he do that's going to be such a big challenge to face for the Steelers offensive line?
It wouldn't surprise me if he's at practice on Wednesday. I don't know. The signs we're getting, I think this is close to being done. It sounds like the communication is very healthy and that they're just kind of a little bit apart. So that to me tells me this is going to get done. I will say, I think the timeline on this matters a lot, because if he signs this on Friday, it's a little different than what TJ Watt did, right? TJ Watt was in team meetings. He was working underneath the guidance of the Steelers strength and conditioning staff, trying to stay conditioned. Nick Bosa hasn't been there. Now, I think Nick Bosa has obviously probably been training off site and staying in shape, but I think Kyle Shanahan has talked about how much kind of trepidation he might have about just throwing Nick Bosa out there for his full snap count. So if he only plays 50% of the snaps he would have, well, the 49ers are 50% worse defensively as a result of that. So that's a factor I think that's kind of underrated. If he ends up signing this like Friday or Saturday and doesn't play his full snap count, I think that's something to watch. He'll make an impact regardless, though. And the reason is he is just a magnetic player. He's very TJ Watt-like in that manner, right? Explosive, deep bag of moves, can bend around the edge, can beat you with power. He's a do-it-all guy. I think in the run game, he's even better actually than he is a pass rush. He's a phenomenal run defender. And so the Steelers as a run team, a run-first team, are obviously going to have to decide if Nick Bosa doesn't play. Well, that opens up the playbook to both sides, but obviously it's going to change if he's playing. You're going to want to run to the opposite side. And let me just, it's no disrespect to the depth edge rushers that the 49ers have, because Drake Jackson's a very promising young player. Cleveland Ferrell, after being a first-round pick and kind of busting out of Las Vegas, has really actually turned himself into quite a nice depth rotational edge rusher. They're just not Nick Bosa. And if Nick Bosa's not there, then you could start to focus on the Javon Hargraves, the Eric Armsteads, right? You could focus on those guys, and that changes what you do as an offensive line, because the Steelers' strength is in the interior. It's with Daniels, Cole, and Sayamalo rather than with Moore and Okorafor on the edge. So if you have to chip Nick Bosa on the edge with Pat Freiermuth or Darnell Washington, it takes Freiermuth out of the route tree too, which frees up Fred Warner to do a lot of things. Like, there's so many ramifications of Nick Bosa not being there that can change what they do. Freiermuth can be more free. Jalen Warren and Najee Harris can be more free to run more routes against these linebackers. And Dre Greenlaw is also a really good linebacker, but Bosa just does so much for this defense. He forces you to slide to his side. He forces you to call him out every time, whether they run stunts. It makes Fred Warner a very, very dangerous blitzer on stunts, because you have to focus on Nick Bosa, but then coming screaming around the edge or up the middle, it's Fred Warner, who's an all-pro linebacker. So you better watch out. And so Nick Bosa is a guy that makes this whole engine run. They have a good defense without Nick Bosa. They might have the best pass rush in the NFL with him. That's how good he is. And so this is a big test for the offensive line. But if he's not there, man, that's a weight off their shoulders, I think, if he's not there. But even if he has this middle ground where he might sign late in the week, but say he only plays 75% of his usual snaps, that's a significant factor too, because that's 10, 15 snaps he might not be on the football field. And that could easily be one explosive play, a big run. That could be anything, right? And so that's a big factor too. There could be a middle ground here where this gets done, but he might not be a full go.
I hear you there. Either way, the Steelers need to prepare as if he's going to be a full go and going to be the Nick Bosa of just last year when he was dominating the NFL. It sounds like that's why the Steelers are preparing for him. And if he lines up against the Steelers, a guy he's going to have to face a lot is Dan Moore Jr. We caught up with him in the Steelers locker room Monday. Here was Dan Moore talking about Nick Bosa and that 49ers defense.
And you guys got a big assignment this week with a tough defensive line to rank. Led the number one defense last year. What are you guys keyed on coming in this week?
They're a good defensive line, like you said, really talented, penetrating front. So just trying to get four hands on, like Tomlin says, get double teams on their interior guys, and try to move the ball on them.
Are you following the Bosa news as much as anybody else?
Nah. We're expecting him to be in the stadium, so that's what we'll lean on.
What does he do that you have to key in on to stop him?
I think he's a really good speed to power guy. He's really efficient with his hands and really good at lifting guys. I think he has natural leverage that allows him to do that as well. Obviously a great athlete, so you got to respect him in that aspect as well.
We know the talent that San Francisco has, but what do they do conceptually that can be really challenging for an offensive line?
A lot of double barrel stuff, a lot of nickel pressure, just trying to key in on things. We obviously don't know exactly what they're going to do week one. We just got to hope that our keys win.
There you have it from Dan Moore Jr. talking about the Niners defense and what they're going to key in on there. And I like the way he broke down Nick Bosa. I think that's a very accurate description of the way that he plays. I do wonder if this is going to be something that we see this upcoming weekend with how the Steelers face it. If this is where we're going to see Darnell Washington come into play and saying, hey, wherever that guy goes, you're on that side and you are helping neutralize him as a pass rusher and helping keep him out of blowing up run plays, because like you said, that's another factor that he has there. But I think this is going to be really intriguing to watch here, Nick, because if Dan Moore and, Isaac Seumalo, Mason Cole, James Daniels, and Chukuma Okorafor, if this line does well against the 49ers, everybody needs to watch out, because this 49ers team, they've added Javon Hargrave. They're a problem. They've got weapons up front, and even without Nick Bosa, but if they're able to move the ball against these guys and hit those keys that Dan Moore's talking about, I think it sets a really strong tone. One, it'll open up the whole offense for the Steelers. It'll open up a big day opportunity for Kenny Pickett in the offense and Najee Harris and everyone. But I really think that this could be the tone setter. And I'm not expecting them to dominate. I'm not saying that I don't think you can do that against this group. But if you can just get win out just by a little bit and keep your quarterback clean for the most of the day and change the line of scrimmage enough so that your run game is a factor, it's going to set a tone that they're going to be able to take on a lot of defenses this year.
Yeah, I think this is a test for the offensive line. I think it's pretty clear they'll be an average group at the very least, right? They'll be a league average group this year, which is a very big improvement over what they've been the last 2 or 3 years. But are they just an average group, or is this a really good group? I think that's the question we need to know, right? I think we need to know if this is a top 10 offensive line. I think it's a possibility. I just think we need to know if it is. And this is a group that's going to test them. It's going to be a battle of wills. I talked with Alex Highsmith about this today on both sides of the football, how both of these teams just want to run the football. They're going to come at you. Everyone's going to need an ice bath after this football game. But when it comes down to that fourth quarter, if the Steelers' offensive line is still getting some movement and is still starting to turn a little bit, right? They're still getting some runs here. They're still popping it. They're not going to completely lose to that D-line. That is a big, big, big endorsement for this team. This is going to be a team that plays in a very physical AFC North. And so it's a great test for them to kind of build up that repertoire and build up their, I guess, clout around the league in terms of what the tape has, right? If they can prove they can block a Nick Bosa-led group, especially. Without Nick Bosa, I think it's impressive, but maybe you still have to wait until you see Myles Garrett and Collins to fully get it in. But if Nick Bosa plays and this group plays as well as they do and can potentially, I think you have to put everyone on alert and say, the O-line's here. Kenny Pickett probably looks better. They have a good stable of backs, and they definitely have a good group of weapons. And the defense is probably going to be pretty good. That point, the Steelers then go from, a team that maybe is on the rise to, all right, they're in this AFC.
I agree, and it's another reason why this week 1 game could be such a tone setter for the season. The week 1 game was impressive last season. It didn't set the tone as the Steelers, were missing TJ Watt. But if they get through this game clean and they pull out a W and they look impressive doing so, I think all these people that we're seeing say that the Steelers are the dark horse, the Steelers are this, the Steelers are the sleeper. I think that's going to get very loud very quickly if they can look good in playing the 49ers. I want to get Nick's thoughts on Desmond King as we move forward here, because Desmond King spoke to the media. We're not going to have his clip on the show, but we will discuss what Desmond King said. He talked about his fit and how things look there and what Nick expects from Desmond King in the Steelers defense. We'll get to that in a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. Still got a lot to discuss here. But first, I want to talk to you guys about FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. Get on FanDuel Sportsbook right now, and new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can be on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh from SteelersNow.com. Let's keep going here. Nick, Desmond King was a late week addition last week, and we got to talk about a little bit on the show about him. But he, for the first time, spoke to Steelers media on Monday after practice in the locker room. Got a good sense of where he's at. He's excited to be with the Steelers. But one thing that I brought up to him, and he kind of, I think he kind of handled well when, we talked to him about, like, he's used to being versatile. He's used to the challenge of lining up wherever he's asked to line up. He's not afraid of being in the slot. He's not afraid of being outside. What is his natural fit in this defense? Is it just slot, or can he line up on the outside at times? You don't want him out there consistently, though.
I think he can line outside, but I'll tell you what he can do that he didn't do last year. He can blitz. His blitz percentage was below 1% last year with Lovie Smith's Texans defense. The year before it was up near 5%. He was good at it. That Mike Hilton role is calling Desmond King's name. I'm telling you right now. That's what he is, man. He is a good cover corner too, but he is a fantastic blitzer who sticks his nose in the fan and does it with pride. And he is a really good blitzer in terms of timing that up off the edge. You know how Mike Hilton did it, and then Arthur Maulet started to really get it going. I think Desmond King can fit into that role absolutely beautifully as the rundown slot. I think he can play certainly as well. I think he offers more versatility than, say, an Elijah Riley in terms of cornerback, because you look at Elijah Riley, he's more of a safety slot. Shannon Sullivan can play outside a little bit, but Desmond King is a guy that has done that recently. And he's been proven to be a really good cover slot corner, specifically when you ask him to work in zones. Buzz flats, curl, the curl hook kind of defender right there, curl flat defender. He is a really good kind of zone corner where he's got great eyes and can read quarterbacks. But I love his versatility in terms of his ability to do that, his ability to then get up on the line and kind of get in receivers' faces and be a little uncomfortable for them in the slot. And then I love his blitzing. I think if the Steelers don't use his blitzing prowess, I think they are misusing what he can do, because I think the Texans did not fully utilize him last year in that respect. He had a good year last year, but this guy is tailor-made for a Steelers rundown slot corner that offers more upside as a coverage player. If you remember how Mike Hilton kind of progressed throughout his career, by the end of his Steelers career, pretty solid coverage guy, right? Maybe never was an elite coverage guy,
Right.
but ended up being quite solid in that area. I don't know if he'll reach Mike Hilton effectiveness, because Mike Hilton was awesome with the Steelers, but I think he can operate in a very similar way. I don't think he plays all that much week one, but I think as we continue to go on through the season, that's a natural role for him to fill. That's kind of where I see him fitting in. But he can play outside in a pinch. I wonder where the outside depth chart is. Say if they experienced, an injury to Joey Porter Jr. or Patrick Peterson goes down, I wonder if he would be the guy that would come in, say, before James Pierre, for example. And I kind of think he would.
I wonder that too. He's a higher draft pick when coming into the NFL than James Pierre, and he's going to be a guy that I think that with his veteran experience, he's going to bring that to the table. And that was something else that I thought was really interesting about this, because he talked about being a veteran and understanding the transition and how to go from team to team and still keep quickly learn the lingo, quickly learn the playbook, quickly learn how to play with your fellow teammates in the schemes that your guys run. And I think that's been my whole thing about this Steelers secondary all offseason was, who Minkah Fitzpatrick is. He's the superstar, but everybody else that's a veteran that they have, Patrick Peterson, Levi Wallace, DeMonte KZ, Keanu Neal, all these guys, they're guys that understand scheme. They understand concepts. They're veterans who can get to the right spots and play the right spots. All of that to me is a factor. And I think that that's where the secondary for the Steelers can absolutely shine this year. Not necessarily with elite playmaking on all sides, but consistently being in the right spots, knowing which things are challenges for quarterbacks, making, giving the kind of looks that are most confusing to opponents, disguising looks the right way. Desmond King fits that bill, I think, to a T.
I think he fits it very well. And the versatility this group has from the safety position, right, where you have Minkah that can do like 6 jobs. KZ can play either spot. Keanu Neal can slide down to linebacker. You have big nickel. You have dime. You can run big dime. So I think Desmond King offers a little bit of an interesting alternative in dime. I think he could be a guy that maybe comes in if, maybe Patrick Peterson gets hurt and can play that dime backer. I feel like that could be something he could do. He's just a really good player in terms of communicating with people too, very vocal from what I've heard and what you watch on tape. You see him like jumping up and pointing out things on his Texans tape. Like he was a veteran in that room pointing things out. And it's a really veteran-led corner group. It's really just Joey Porter Jr. as the young guy surrounded by these vets, which, by the way, I think is going to greatly help Joey Porter Jr. in his growth process throughout this season. They just have guys that can do a lot of different things, and they have a lot of different skill sets. I think that's a big thing too. They have 3 quality slot corner options, like 7 corners. They like never keep 7 corners, but
no,
I don't really see a reason to not keep these guys. I just think between special teams and what they can do, we talked about Riley playing that safety role, right? He can play free. He can play strong. Shan Sullivan can play outside. They're all good at special teams. Desmond King's a punt returner, for goodness sakes. They can do all of this kind of different things. And then you have Patrick Peterson, who previously hadn't played anywhere outside of outside corner. And now he can play dimebacker and slot. Like it's a really fun group to watch. And so far, what I've been encouraged by has just been the lack of coverage buzz. Like in practice, in the preseason, you just look at the group and they communicate at a very high level. And Desmond King fits in very well with that mantra. So I look at this group and think they can do a lot of different things, disguising coverages, going from pre-snap to post-snap, giving different looks, really allowing Minkah Fitzpatrick to become what he is, which is a weapon X, essentially, which is let's let Minkah do what Minkah does best and kind of freelance and let him do what a good playmaker should do. I think Minkah has a great year as a result of that. So I think this group, man, is a really versatile group. It's different than it was last year, but the secondary looks really solid right now because you're going to have to beat them with good playmaking rather than, I think, expecting coverage bust with wide open receivers running down the sideline.
I mean, that was something that we saw in the preseason. As much as we praised the Steelers offense for putting points up on the board and looking really solid, even when a guy got open, the secondary was right there to bring him down all throughout the preseason. I think, again, it goes to what you're saying, what I'm saying. This defense, this secondary is going to be ready to execute the scheme and will be limiting the amount of stakes that opponents can capitalize on. Big factor for them moving forward this year. Nick, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Farabaugh FB, listed right there. Make sure to check out SteelersNow.com. Read more over there. Also, check out Steelers Afternoon Drive, our podcast. Chris, you were just on that recently.
Yes, I was. It's a good time.
So make sure to check it out.
Absolutely. Check all the great workout that they have at SteelersNow.com. Nick, thanks so much for joining me. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and check me out here on the Locked On Steelers podcast Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll see you tomorrow. We got Arthur Moats coming on the show. He's going to get you ready for what to expect this week, as well as we hear from Mike Tomlin for the first time in a week leading up to a regular season game this season. All that and more here on the Wednesday episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll see you then right here.